welcome to What Theory with Joel. My name is Joel, and today I'm going to be talking about a myth, and that's the myth of the middle class. So I'll start with a story. I am a middle class kid. Ha! Surprise! Well, maybe not necessarily, but I remember as a kid not really thinking about the things that we needed. I had food, I could go to school, like everything was more or less fine. Until a certain age when my dad came home with a different car. I went, hey, this is a bigger car. And there was a slight difference, always asking for toys, asking for things to be given to you. There were a lot of no's, maybe 1 or 2 yeses, but then the yeses started increasing. And I got to the idea of, I think we're doing okay. We're kawa. And being indelicate as a child, you visit different people and you start weighing. I visited a friend and then I realized that a human being could have a swimming pool. Like you have your own swimming pool. That's when I realized, maybe we're not as rich as I thought we are. So I started gauging myself. And you go to school, you hear about the push to becoming middle class. So it's almost like there are 3 classes. There's the wealthy class, the middle class, then there's the lower classes, the people who don't have property, who struggle to survive. And that basic framework, I think, is one that if you speak to people, it's more or less something that we take for granted. We're all pushing for middle class status. We're trying to get to the point of being the comfortable class. And if I was to describe it, it's more or less a cultural phenomenon. You probably sell your labor. It's probably white collar. You vacation in certain ways. You have the latest applications and machines. You have a certain lingo. You culturally are astute and you enjoy things of a certain hue, shall I say. And for the longest time I thought, that's defining something real that actually exists. And the middle class is meant to be the biggest class. It's so big that there's actually demarcations within there. There's the lower middle class, there's the upper middle class, and then there's the comfortable class right there in the middle. And as I've thought about it a bit more, I think that's an obfuscation. That's a blinding to the actual truth. So class conflict, at least the Marxist school of it, would have it that they're the people who own the means of production, and they're the people who earn their living by selling their time and their labor. And that's the distinction. How would you know that you're part of the wealthy class, the capitalist class? Is you own things that are factors of production. The way you earn income, the way you hoard wealth is not through your activity, but it's through the things that you own. Money works for you. And then if you're a laborer, you have to sell your time. So when you're thinking about how you're going to earn an income, it's about selling your skills. And there's definitely a hierarchy there. There are people who you'd say are in menial jobs, so they bring their physical labor to whatever work that they're doing. If they're a plumber, if they're an engineer, we think of those as more or less blue collar. And then there's the managerial class, which is always selling their intellect, selling their time and their personality. And the reason I think that it causes an issue is if you saw someone, say, living well off, eating in a restaurant, has a number of houses, and you might look at them and say, well, that person is now a capitalist. But the slight difference might be that that person is probably just a well-paid wage laborer. That if you cut off their source of income, they would be done. They wouldn't be able to earn anymore. And there is a precariousness in the middle class. And I think that's the thing that we all fear. George Carlin used to say that the reason the lower classes exist is to scare the shit out of the middle class. Because if you don't keep doing what you're doing, you can very easily fall. And I suppose that's what capitalist ideology is all about. It's about creating a division. It's about creating a sense that the way things are is fine. I mean, that's just the way the world has always been. But if you think about the global wealth pyramid, The bourgeoisie have come for me. But if you think about the breakdown of wealth distribution, 85% of wealth in the world is owned by 10% of people. And the bottom 50% own only about 1% of wealth. And that is fundamentally undemocratic. I mean, if you think about the contradictions that we live in, we're saying that the voices of the people matter. And most people are dissatisfied. They find that they don't own anything. They have to sell out their time. They have to, do back-breaking work for very little returns. And the effort that they're putting in is usually appropriated and taken by massive corporations or by the people who own those corporations. And that no one seems to think that that's fine, but yet it continues to pervade. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is satiating us? What is it that's allowing this to keep moving? And I think there is an internal conflict. The Marxian idea is that the failure to recognize what class you're in can make you almost a traitor to the class that you're part of. So say, for instance, you become a manager at work. That means you've been given the responsibility of making sure production moves as it's supposed to. So your allegiance is towards a certain rationale. It's towards making sure that capital is getting the maximum amount of return. But in order for that to happen, you have to make sure that the laborers are happy enough that they're going to be productive. And as that starts to become, I guess maybe part of your job description, you're forced to think of ways in which you can get people to produce more and more. And the more that is produced, it goes to your wage going higher. So your wage depends on other people's wages. And you might be tempted into thinking, oh, I'm now part of the capitalist class. I'm now part of the wealthy. Not really. You're just probably a very well-paid laborer. You're well compensated. But at the back of your mind, you know that if you fail to live according to that rationale, you could very easily lose everything that you have. A very good test to see if you're in one class or another is think about if you decided to not work for 2 years. If you just decided, I'm not going to do anything for 2 years, what would happen to your life? And I think if you find that to be a scary proposition, you know that you would lose almost everything, very likely you're not in a class different from someone who has to work day in, day out for a paycheck. It's just that you have fancier things all around you. And that realization, I think for me, means that there is no individual way to solve this. Saving more, being prudent, all of the things are really important. But I think having dialogue like this where you're able to share and say, well, I'll give you this example. I think it's best exemplified in places like America, where you have the middle of the country and then you have people on the coasts. And those two are usually battling with each other. There are obviously very many big differences that happen across a wide swath of people, cultural differences. Some will be to do with how people think about sexist ideas, people who have racist ideas, people who might not have as much knowledge as each other, and we divide ourselves along those lines, forgetting that those differences are part of ways in which you can keep people distracted from the real issue of we don't have enough. Our economic relations, therefore, are going to determine how we treat each other. And I suppose class consciousness only comes when you fully understand that the best way to keep someone enslaved is to make them not think that they're slaves. If you watch Succession, there's a great quote from that show about making sure that the slaves don't dress the same way. Because if they eventually do look around, they'll see just how many of them there are, and they'll eventually have to revolt. So these small differences, are you a Mac guy versus a Dell guy? Are you an Apple person? Are you, what are the other things? I think, do you listen to Amapiano? People listen to Amapiano. Like sometimes I listen to it and I go, I mean, that's just like house music, black coffee. Anyway, see how old I am. Basic generalities are, we have these divisions in which we think, yeah, I'm doing okay, at least I'm not that person. But I think the truth is we are really in a much more dire situation than we realize. But we've been, I guess, sort of given a salve. We've been given products. And that's where, the next episode, I'm going to be talking about the invisible hand of the market and why I think that invisible hand is an iron hand. But the first thing that I wanted to, sort of speak about in today's episode was just that feeling of the fact that you think that the middle class exists. It's a definition of a cultural class, but it's not an economic class. Myself and the person who works maybe as the head of the company might be a top CEO earning millions of dollars. He might have some capital, but that's not the primary means by which he makes his living. And therefore, he has to live out a certain ideology. He has to sell his time. He has to, make sure that certain things are true in order for him to earn his wage. He sells it so that he can uphold the ideology of capital. I do the same thing in my everyday work. The difference is, as you move along that chain, some places it's more nuanced and other places it's a little bit more brutal. If you lived under a feudal system, definitely you would know that you're working as a serf on someone's land. Right now, your boss is your friend. And that friendship, that congenial relationship masks the power relation that we are under. And if you take the time to think about it, you could just be a comfortable wage slave. And I don't think that's a comfortable thought for all of us, but it's one we have to go through. So thank you for paying attention. Read the Communist Manifesto. That's the reading for this week. And if I work with you, don't ask me these questions at the office, because that's working time. Bye.